everybody. It's Roxanne from Champion of My Heart, and I wanted to make a little video slideshowy thing for you today about that new doodle dog data that came out here in January 2022. I wanted to kind of talk about it a little bit, help you understand it a little bit better. So let's get started. So the data was released this January 2022 by Nationwide Veterinary Analytics, which is the research arm of Nationwide Insurance, which now owns and has for quite a while what was originally called Veterinary Pet Insurance, which is one of the oldest pet insurance companies out there. It's now part of Nationwide, and they have a veterinary analytics team. So that's who released this white paper. And the data basically covers the popularity of doodle dogs and their parent breeds, the relative risk for cancer claims for doodle dogs and their parent breeds. And it's important to know that the data comes from 1.61 million dogs insured by Nationwide with claims data over 6 years. So you can download all of this and read it for yourself at the URL here on the screen. It's pretty easy to find if you like even just Google, like Nationwide veterinary doodle data or something, it'll come up. So that is where we're headed right now. That's what we're going to look at. So you can download all three of these things. So if you go to that URL that was just on the screen, on the left, I think it'll be on the left for you. Sorry, the one with the dogs, 3 dog faces on it. That's sort of a summary, but almost like a press release that you can download. The middle one is actually the white paper itself. It is, let me see how many pages. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, about 5.5 pages. And you can read it all yourself. And then the other one, is the methodology, and that's, let's see, 1, 2, 3, a little bit more than 3 pages. And so the methodology is pretty interesting if you really want to understand how they gathered the data and processed it and all that. So all of this is available for free online. You can go, look at it, download it, read it, whatever, for yourself. I encourage you to do that. But let's start with understanding what big data is. So before we specifically look at the data that Nationwide released, which is the first, by the way, of 3 planned white papers that they have underway that they're going to be releasing here soon. So this is the first one. But let's look at what big data is, as well as what big data can and cannot tell us, because it is not the cure-all for everything, in case you were worried. It's not. It has some flaws and some limitations, but it can be helpful. So basically, big data, no matter where it comes from, typically features these characteristics. Velocity, meaning that the data is accumulating faster all the time. Volume, meaning that we now have much greater data sets that are accessible and usable thanks to more powerful computing and analysis. It used to be, particularly in the veterinary world, that a data set in like the hundreds was considered big. Now we have access through all kinds of databases in the veterinary world of hundreds of thousands of instances or data points that can be analyzed, up to, again, this one was 1.61 million. So volume is getting bigger. And then variety, and that's actually kind of an important thing, that the data often comes from different sources that may be outside of typical scientific inquiry for the other kinds of studies that you might be familiar with. So let's look at those differences. And I want to be clear here that, again, Nationwide Veterinary Analytics is the research arm of the pet insurer. This is really what they do. So this next part, where I'm going to poke a little bit at the flaws and the problems with big data, is not meant to point or poke at the people from Nationwide. I think they've done a fantastic job, and I'm not besmirching this data at all. So just know that. That said, it's important to understand some differences. And I would say, let's start with scientific studies that we're typically used to seeing happen in a very deliberate data collection world that is self-contained. It's a very controlled world with very specific objectives for analyzing the data. Big data, on the other hand, in many cases is different. It's potentially coming from non-scientific sources, such as the Internet of Things, and that could be anything from your smartphone to your bed that has an app attached to it, or even something like an activity monitor that counts your steps or measures your workouts or whatever, right? That's the Internet of Things, as it's called. And companies are collecting all of that data. If you're accessing apps like that, companies are collecting that data. And so potentially big data is being gathered for reasons other than scientific analysis. And I don't want that to sound like I'm suddenly going to be like a conspiracy nut here for you. But sometimes we know the real reasons companies are gathering data and how they're using it, and sometimes we don't. So, when you're looking at big data that gets released and gets, spread in the media or whatever, just think a little critically about where it came from and, potentially its actual use versus perhaps what's being reported. So what does big data tell us? Big data can and cannot tell us certain things. Big data may reveal relationships, patterns, and trends that they see in the data that then spurs more scientific inquiry. Maybe there's a specific trend or a pattern that then other researchers can really dig into and create a true, scientific inquiry into that one point to figure things out that build upon what the big data tells us. So it's important to know that big data cannot uncover causality or correlation. That requires additional investigation. So when you're looking at big data results, they're often not telling you, because they can't, they're not saying why whatever they're reporting happens, the cause of it, the reason. They're just telling you that there's something noticeable in the data set. The other thing is that big data also often suffers from either self-selection or self-exclusion. So in this instance, right, it's dogs who are insured by Nationwide, right? That's a choice. That is a self-selection. That there could be exclusions, right? There's probably a lot of doodle dogs or Labrador retrievers or golden retrievers that are not insured, right? So that they are self-excluded, right? They're not in these data sets. So, so that's another thing to watch out for. So let's look at what they reported. Basically, it was two things. The first one is that doodle popularity is up and doodle parent breed popularity is down. Right? So you can see in this chart from the white paper how much, golden doodles are up 347.4%, labradoodles 196.5%, and poodle crosses of all types are up 160.3%. Whereas when you see down below, standard poodles are down 32.2%. Straight up purebred labs are down 32.0%, and golden retrievers down 4%. So doodle popularity up, parent breeds down. Pretty simple. The second point the white paper makes is that doodle owners are considerably less likely to have submitted a claim for cancer diagnosis or treatment. And then the white paper specifically goes on to say the relative risk for cancer claims is dramatically lower in labradoodles and golden doodles in comparison to their contributing breeds, namely standard poodles, golden retrievers, and Labrador retrievers. So here's the chart on that. And so again, we're looking at relative risk of cancer claims in the parent breeds versus the doodle crossbred dogs. So the doodles are in yellow here. Oh, I'm circling with my mouse. You can't see it, but so the doodles are in sort of the yellow, orange, and the parent breeds are in the blue color there. And so you can see, the 75% reduction in relative risk, or a 62% reduction in relative risk in the doodles versus their contributing sort of parent breeds there. So I'm going to leave that up on screen for a second so that you can absorb it. There's a slide after this that kind of shows the math for this. So hang in there on that. Okay, so we will go. So here in the methodology and background document, there's a page that explains how they calculated the relative risk. And I will tell you, this is not my strong suit, right? So I had to read through these illustrations of the calculations several times before it really clicked in my head. And even if I tried to explain it to you now, I probably would not do a very good job. So I will just leave that to the folks, who created these documents. You can go in and read and reread this page over and over again until it makes sense to you. But this is how they calculated that relative risk that we just saw in the previous slide. So I will tell you, I've only had experiences with doodle dogs in a very limited way. Back in the day, our original canine heroine, Lily, and I took a lot of classes, just basic pet dog training classes up in Boulder, Colorado, north of where we live. And lots and lots of doodle dogs in those classes, right? It's very, very common, here in Colorado where we live. I'm sure probably where you live too. But so we had exposure to a lot of very early doodles, decades ago, a decade ago, not decades plural, but, a while back, a decade ago at least. And I can say that Lily was not a fan of doodles back in the day. The ones we were around were boisterous and silly and overly friendly, probably, which was not ideal for Lily, who was not particularly a fan of other dogs. She found them kind of stressful. So we would keep our distance from them. They were, a handful. But last year, so in spring of 2021, we had the opportunity to foster a doodle puppy that came into the shelter, for which we volunteer. At the time, she was called Maggie. I don't know what her new adopters named her, but we called her Maggie, and she came to stay with us just for a little while to assess whether or not some urine dribbling that the shelter staff saw after her spay surgery was a real issue or not. And that's hard to establish. It's hard to monitor in the shelter environment. So she came to stay with us for just a little while. Really sweet puppy, good sized puppy, right? So it was nice because we didn't have to be as super careful and watchful with her the way we do with the really tiny puppies that we foster. But she got to play with our three dogs and loved it. They all enjoyed her very much. She was very silly, very playful. It turned out that indeed there was nothing wrong with her bladder. She was completely fine. She just needed to go through a little, what we call, house training boot camp here, and she did beautifully. So she just stayed with us for a little while, got adopted right away. Super sweet little thing. So that's really my only firsthand experience with a doodle, but she was lovely. Here's another picture of her. See, look how cute she was. We called her the Muppet Face Baby because she had that, just classic sort of Muppety face that they have, which I'm sure is part of the reason they're so popular. So that's what I wanted to tell you about big data and this particular doodle data that recently came out. Happy to have any questions, if you have them, let me know, either here or on the main site. I will be posting some of this information also on our site, which is championofmyheart.com. If you prefer to read or comment over there, that is fine as well. So that's it for today. Thanks so much. Have a super day.